Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to be discussing the different fields of psychology and the careers of these different fields. To start with, we're going to be going over biopsychology, which is the scientific study of how our biology influences our behavior. Biopsychology focuses on how behavior is based on biological physiology in organisms. And if you're interested in biopsychology, you might be also interested in how our sensory or motor systems work. You might be interested in neurology and how our nerves connect to our brain, as you could see here, the different peripheral nervous system and how that connects to the central nervous system. You might be interested in reproductive behavior, or how drug use affects our physiology, or even how psychological disorders affect our physiology, or how physiological disorders are rooted in different chemicals within the brain. The careers of biopsychology include being a research assistant, actively researching topics in biopsychology, becoming a neuropsychologist, which researches the brain or the nervous system, or even a clinician. You could be a clinician and be a psychiatrist, testing psychological disorders and prescribing medication to help with those psychological disorders. Next, we have evolutionary psychology, which is the scientific study of behavior and cognitive processes which have evolved over time due to natural selection. Evolutionary psychology was started with Charles Darwin. And if you're interested in evolutionary psychology, you might be interested in how genetics play a role in people's lives, how our behavior is determined by natural selection, and how behavior or cognitive processes are adaptive, how behaviors and traits allow organisms to reproduce and survive. And some careers in evolutionary psychology include going into research. If you're interested in animals, evolutionary psychology might be a field of psychology for you. You could study behavior in animals, cognition in animals, and if you're interested in working for an animal institution such as a zoo or a foundation for animals, going into evolutionary psychology may be helpful. My master's thesis was rooted in evolutionary psychology. My master's thesis was on snake detection theory, which proposed that the primate visual system evolved due to intense selection pressures which were posed by snakes early in the primate evolution. And because humans have evolved from primates, we also have these evolutionary adaptations of our visual systems, which were able to quickly detect and avoid a snake and other snake-like objects. But my master's thesis was focused on not only do we have conscious adaptations that allow us to detect and avoid a snake, but we also have unconscious abilities to detect a snake and avoid it through our visual system. So for my thesis, I had participants, like you see here, watch a video that I created. I created GoPro videos where I placed either a snake, rabbit, or bottle on a trail. And I walked this hike with a GoPro on my head. And I would walk this hike and came in contact with either one of the snakes, rabbits, or bottles that I placed there. And unknowingly, these participants would watch the video, not knowing that there was a snake, rabbit, or bottle on the trail. And I would measure their heart rate and skin response to see if they produced any sweat in response to viewing the video. As participants were watching, they were hooked up to the heart rate and skin conductance measures. And I found that those participants who saw one of these objects on the hike found that they had greater heart rate decelerations and increased sweats when they saw a snake compared to the rabbit or bottles. But also when they didn't report seeing the snake, they also produced greater physiological measures in sweat conductance and heart rate decelerations in response to the snake as opposed to the rabbit or bottle. And this suggests that we have both conscious and unconscious visual adaptations in order to quickly detect a snake as a threat and try to avoid it. And because heart rate and sweat is a signal of an adverse, stressful reaction within our body, that's why I measured it. And these participants showed an increase in sweat and heart rate when they saw and when they did not report seeing a snake compared to bottles and rabbits. So this lends toward the general theory of snake detection theory, that we have visual adaptations that quickly are able to detect a snake more than other objects. If you're interested more in my master's thesis, I could lend you a copy of the written portion, and you could see how exactly I created the methods and did the research on this topic. But yeah, please let me know if you'd like to know more information about my thesis. I'll be happy to share it. Next, we have sensation and perception. And this sensation refers to the process of sensing through our five senses, which include seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and the sensation of touch. And then perception refers to the way we interpret these sensations. So as we look here on this object, our sensation is with our eyes, and we use perception in order to distinguish what this image is. And there's two iterations of what this image could be. So this could be a duck, if you see the duck bill here and its eye, or this could be a rabbit, as you see the rabbit's nose, the rabbit's eye, and the rabbit's ears here. And the way we perceive this image is we could perceive both images of this duck or the rabbit, and that's the role perception plays in our senses. If you're interested in sensation and perception, you might be interested in how our senses relay information to the brain and how the brain makes sense of those sensations and how our brain perceives those sensations. You might be interested in how we perceive sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch or feeling. You might be interested in Gestalt psychology. As I mentioned, Gestalt psychology was the basis for sensation and perception. You might be interested in cognition. And certain careers in sensation and perception include being a researcher, being a human-computer interaction specialist, researching how human and computers interact, organizational psychology, speech pathologist, or being an eye doctor. Next, we have cognitive psychology, which is the scientific study of mental processes and how we take in information, how we process it into thoughts. Some interests in cognitive psychology include memory, short-term and long-term memory, the difference between the two, thinking, how we think about certain things and how we form thoughts, problem solving, so how we work things out in our head in order to solve a problem, how we produce language, how we first think about it and then say it, attentional processes. And certain careers in cognitive psychology include going into research, being a computer scientist, being a linguist like Noam Chomsky, who was interested in cognitive psychology, being a neuroscientist. You could work for corporate or private businesses in order to investigate how people think and how their thinking might help profits within these businesses. Or you could be an organizational psychologist in order to help the flow of a workplace. Next, we have developmental psychology, which is the scientific study of development across the lifespan. Some interests include, if you're interested in children, if you like children, you might be interested in developmental psychology. If you're interested in adolescents or teens and how teens develop, or if you're interested in how we age and the elderly population. You might be interested in parental and peer influences on development, or even school influence on development, and how culture affects our development. Or you might be interested in how we go through physical changes or psychological changes throughout our development. Some careers include going into research, being a behavioral therapist, becoming a social worker to work with kids and to work with teens, being a teacher, being a counselor, or even a rehab specialist. Next, we have personality psychology, which is a scientific study of how behavior, emotions, motivation, and thoughts compare among different people in different groups. Some interest includes psychoanalytic theory, which I mentioned in the previous video, was established by Freud. How traits influence people, how basic needs and self-fulfillment influence people, different social interactions, if you're interested in children's temperaments, and some careers in personality psychology include going into research, being a social worker, being a school and career counselor, or being a marketing analyst to market certain things toward different people. Next, we have social psychology, which is a scientific study of how the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of people are influenced by the active, implied, or imagined presence of others. Interests include situational factors, or how social norms or rules govern people, how we often think in groupthink and conformity, or how different attitudes and stereotypes might influence people. Conformity, and how we try to get people to change their behaviors, or if you're interested in biases. Some careers in social psychology include research, includes human resources at a workplace, or public relations or marketing. You could be a consultant, a manager, you could work in government and be a politician. You could work in IO psychology or industrial organizational psychology, or you could be a forensic psychologist who investigates murders. And then we have health psychology, which is the scientific study of biological, psychological, and sociocultural factors that influence our health. Some interests in health psychology include health education, behavior change, sports and exercise, nutrition, psychological stress and how that affects our health, and how different relationships among us affect our health. Some careers in health psychology include going into research, being a health advocate, being a dietitian or nutritionist. You could be a wellness specialist. You can go into the medical field or rehabilitation. And then we have clinical psychology, which is the study of understanding, preventing, and relieving psychological-based distress and promotes general well-being. This is how our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors all interconnect. Some interests include abnormal psychology or psychological disorders. It can include counseling, if you're interested in different therapy practices, or the theory of the best practices to use for certain psychological disorders. One of which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which we'll go into in chapter 15. And then some careers: you could be a counselor, you could be a social worker, a researcher, private practice, psychologist, either a PhD or a PsyD. A PsyD is usually more rooted in clinician and therapy work, and you're a doctorate in therapy, whereas a PhD is really more education-based, and you're doing more research on clinical psychology. You could be a psychiatrist, which is able to prescribe people with medications. You could be a mental health worker or autism specialist. I worked with people, adults who had autism, and it was a good, rewarding experience. If you're interested in working with people with autism, please feel free to ask me any questions and how you can get involved or start working with people who have autism. I know a few resources that I could direct you towards. And in order to search for these psychology careers, you could do a quick Google search, or you could look at the American Psychological Association, or the APA. And this is a professional organization of psychologists in the US. It's the largest organization in the world, and its mission is to advance and disseminate psychological knowledge. If we go to apa.org, we can look at the various careers here. If you want to go to the careers tab at the top, it shows careers in psychology. And if you go down, you'll be able to look at here. So starting your career, today's job market. You could choose an applied practice, practitioner, or academia and research. You could look at salaries in psychology. And I think if you click here, starting your career, there's a lot of resources on maybe how to get a job during the pandemic, career paths in psychology. The good job may not be good for you. How to use your psych degree for an outside career in academia. But I think we want to go here. No. Let's see if we go to applied. Actually, I think go to thinking about a career in psychology. Go ahead and click that link, and you could learn more about the careers in psychology. So you can look at what is psychology, what are the subfields of psychology, and it'll give you a breakdown. So like I mentioned before, clinical psychologists, cognitive, community, counseling, developmental, educational, engineering, environmental, and so on and so forth. It has a list from, it looks like A through Z of the different fields you can go in as a psychologist. You can look at the job outlook, what psychologists do and where they do it, etc. So if you want a good resource to look into different careers in psychology, go to the APA website and explore different careers there. Right, and then the last thing I want to let you guys know are just a few reminders. So please go ahead and read chapter 1, and while you're reading, might as well do the text assignment, and then make sure you complete the learning activity in conjunction with the text assignment. Make sure you study for the exam, which the last day to do it will be on the 6th or 7th. I'll let you know a more definitive date, and then make sure to ask questions and let me know if you have any questions regarding the videos that I've posted or anything in the class. And with that, good luck, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, guys.